Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on this EDC Coffee Chat. I appreciate your time and you joining us, and I'm excited to have Donica Ramsey from J.G. Ralston Law Firm on with us. Graham Ralston is also on with us. The big thing that I think drives this issue is the lack of clarity around what a business owner should be asking a employee relative to their HIPAA rights and privacy, and then also though ensuring that they are meeting the mandate of the governor's proclamation. So I appreciate everyone joining us. And so Graham, do you want to start and introduce Donica, who's going to be providing us with quite a bit of information this morning?
Yes, thank you very much, Colleen, for the introduction. We're excited to be here this morning with Ralston Law, and Donica, who worked with us her last year of law school at Seattle U and recently moved to Port Angeles just a few weeks ago. Even though she'd been working with us the whole time, we finally found some housing for her on the peninsula, and we couldn't be more excited for her to be working full-time with Ralston Law. She put together this great presentation. We've been doing a lot of work with clients specifically in the COVID space. So we thought we'd share some of these resources with the community at large of what we're covering. I know in Donica's presentation, she's going to go over a disclaimer, but I just want to emphasize again before she goes into this, this is not a political statement from our firm by any means. We are not taking a side. This is only a reflection of current regulations and laws. So as we present them, we are not presenting or advocating for either side of this COVID situation. We are merely just presenting the current state of regulations. So if it comes time for Q&A, please recognize that once again, we are not advocating for a specific side. We're just merely sharing current regulations and laws. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Donica to start the presentation.
Thank you, Graham. Okay, so I'm going to try to share my screen, see if this works. Can everybody see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. Are you guys getting the full? Okay, I think you are. All right. So I'm just going to discuss some stuff over the vaccine mandate, the governor's proclamation, and how it applies to certain businesses and employers, what kind of things you can and can't do, or what things you shouldn't do as far as asking your employees for certain information and what you should keep on records for yourselves. And again, as Graham said, this information is changing. There are current lawsuits out there, and depending on the outcomes of those, the validity of this information may change. And your attendance or your participation in this does not in any way create a attorney-client relationship. So just an overview on the vaccine mandate. The governor issued Proclamation 2114.1 on August 20th of this year. And this proclamation requires that healthcare providers, educational settings, state agencies, and healthcare settings, that all employees, contractors, and volunteers must be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 by October 18th. The proclamation does allow for religious and medical exemptions with reasonable accommodations for people. Again, the proclamation went into effect on October 18th of this year. And I'd like to give you a few definitions of who it applies to, because there was some confusion with some people on what a healthcare setting is, what a healthcare provider is, what the state agency is. So the healthcare setting is defined as any setting where healthcare services are administered to people. And this could be a long-term care facility, hospitals. It includes pharmacies, whether that pharmacy is standing alone or in a grocery store or something like that. If the healthcare facility is within another business, then the healthcare setting is only the part of the business that is providing these healthcare services. So like for a pharmacy and a grocery store, it would only apply to the pharmacy, not the whole grocery store. And then a healthcare provider is defined as anybody who is providing healthcare services and has a credential licensed with the state. And so that may include doctors, nurses, massage therapists, nurse practitioners, audiologists, anybody who's delivering some sort of healthcare service that has a credential with the state. Now, this does not apply to somebody who is providing healthcare services in home to one-on-one to people. And it also doesn't apply to anybody who has this credential but is not currently using that credential right now. You're not required to get vaccinated. There's nobody from the Department of Health is going to suspend your license. They're not going to ask for every credentialed person. They're going to maintain their current complaint procedures that allow them to go through that process. And only then would they remove your credential if they found out that you were practicing without the vaccine. State agencies or anybody that's, it's a state agency, any government employer. And then educational settings are all public, private, and charter schools, all public and private universities and colleges, including technical colleges, and daycare facilities, pre-K, stuff like that. Anybody who's working around children in general. And all of the employees are required to be vaccinated, and this includes contractors and volunteers if they are working on site. If your employer or employee, volunteer, or contractor is not working on site, if there's a potential that they could be working on site, the proclamation still applies to them. It would only apply or not apply to the employees, volunteers, and contractors who are working from home and would have no reason to go on site, then they would be exempt from that. Now, the proclamation does provide space for religious and medical exemptions, and I'll go into some details about those now. So the religious exemption requires that the employee request the exemption. The employer must maintain proof that that request was made. There's no specific as how that has to be or what kind of documentation, just that you document that the employee made the request. And within that request, the employee must make a statement explaining why or the way in which the requirements conflict with the sincerely held religious belief, practice, or observance of that employee. Again, there's no specific form that's required, just as long as the employee is making that statement and you believe it to be true, then you are allowed as the employer to grant a religious exemption. I have seen a few forms out there with information or asking the employee to put certain information on there where they must mark that they've never received a vaccine and go into more detail about their religious beliefs. Again, that's not in the proclamation. There's no specificity that requires it be a certain form or written out a certain way. Just the employee makes that statement and that you as the employer believe that to be true, then you can grant that religious exemption. For the medical / disability exemptions, the employer, again, is required to maintain proof that that request was made. And then you must get from the employee documentation from an appropriate healthcare or rehabilitation professional stating the necessity of the accommodation and the probable duration of the need for that accommodation. Again, there's no specific form, no other details are required from the healthcare provider or the rehabilitation professional, just that it states the necessity of the accommodation and the probable duration of that accommodation. Now, for reasonable accommodations, there is nothing in the proclamation that specifically says what those are or what kind of limitations an employer has in granting those, but that they are required. So you cannot grant the religious and medical exemption and then just allow them to be non-vaccinated with no other rules or regulations. You need some sort of accommodation that still protects your vaccinated employees from the unvaccinated employees. You still must comply with all federal law as well. So as an employer, most of you should be familiar with like the Americans with Disabilities Act, maybe the Rehabilitation Act of 73, Civil Rights Act of 64, and here in Washington, the Washington Law Against Discrimination. You want to make sure you keep the same policies and procedures in place that you've had prior to COVID when granting these accommodations. They can be anywhere from requiring the unvaccinated employees to have masks, separating them from the rest of employees, or from separating them a little bit more from customers, things like that. You can require certain weekly or bi-weekly testing and show that you have a negative COVID test. Any of these accommodations that allow you as the employer to still maintain your business, maintain your proper procedures and follow all federal law, and not to be discriminating or run the risk of discriminating against anybody. You're also not required to provide reasonable accommodations if it will put you as the employer in undue hardship. The EEOC says that undue hardship means significant difficulty or expense. So if you granted a religious or medical exemption and the reasonable accommodation that you're thinking about trying to implement would require you to spend way more money or to put other employees in harm's way, then you might be able to deny that exemption because you can't provide actual reasonable accommodations while still maintaining your business properly and not creating undue hardship for yourself. I've also provided some resources here for you guys, just because I think that it's really nice when you have that information at hand and that you can go look it up yourself without having to try to ask for legal advice. So the Washington State Department of Health has a great frequently asked questions list specifically about the proclamation. It goes into detail. It's been updated recently, and they have little like tabs next to the questions that says that they're new. And it answers some of the questions about reasonable accommodations, some undue hardship. Will we lose our credentials if we don't comply with this mandate, and things like that. The governor's website has a frequently asked question page specifically for the proclamation as well, where they go into a little bit more detail, provide some sample forms that are an option to use. I like to stress that there is nothing specifically in the proclamation stating that you have to use those forms that are on the governor's website. They're just giving you a way to make it a little easier for you, maybe, if you like that form and you can use it for some of the exemptions. I guess I put this link in here twice. Sorry, I meant to put in the actual link to the actual proclamation because it's provided on attached to the governor's website, where you can actually read the detailed proclamation defining the healthcare setting and healthcare provider. And that also includes information about what is not a healthcare setting and what is not healthcare provider, just so there's no confusion for people. And then the Labor and Industries has a great website also for COVID-19 workplace safety and health. They've got information there about the latest on mask mandates, and then information about how to avoid discrimination in the workplace during a pandemic. So this, I think, is really good information for any employer, whether or not the mandate applies to you, just so you can see how to best protect yourself from discriminating against other discrimination within your business, so that you don't have any issues with possible suits from employees later on when you require them to wear masks or when you set up certain safety and cleaning protocols. So I think that's a great website for you to really look at. And that's all I have. I'd like to open the floor for questions if anybody has any. I'll go ahead and end this.
So if you have any questions, please either raise your hand or put your question in the chat. But so I have a couple questions to kick it off.
Okay.
if I am a business owner and I've determined that, yes, my business sector or industry does need to ensure that all of the employees are vaccinated, do I go through and ask each individual whether or not they've been vaccinated and what's the vaccination proof I need to see?
So you need to see actual proof of the vaccination card, and you need to obtain that proof for your own records. You're not allowed to share this as a HIPAA rule. You know, you still have to keep all medical information about your employees private, but you do need to obtain actual, you need to see the vaccination card and keep proof of that. Asking an employee if they are vaccinated and getting just their statement saying yes or no is not enough. And I believe not the proclamation, but the frequently asked questions site on the governor has somebody asked that, and so they've answered that you have to actually see the paperwork and not just take their word for it.
Okay. And what if I'm a contractor? Say I'm working on the project between Sequim and Port Angeles, what is that, Seabrook Creek, I think. That's a state Department of Transportation project. Would I, as a business owner, need to ensure that all of my employees that are working on that project are vaccinated, even though it's an outdoor site?
So the employees, are they actually working for a state agency, or are you just working on a state project?
State project.
Okay, I don't believe so based on the proclamation. I pulled it up just to double check, but it only defines state agency as certain agencies listed on the governor's website. And so unless your business fell into that, or one of the other specifically defined educational setting or healthcare setting, then no, you would not have to have that, the way I'm interpreting the proclamation. Okay. Graham, if I've said something wrong at any point, please step in.
No, you haven't, but our
Okay.
focus today is on Washington state law. There are some, you bring up an interesting point, Colleen, and with different transportation projects, there could be federal funding involved. And then do people become federal contractors? And then there's additional federal regulations that could be applied. We're not here to present on those today. If someone has specific questions related to federal concerns, then they should follow up with us individually.
Mm-hmm. Can you give an example of like the types of businesses in our community that are dealing with trying to understand if they are contracting with state organizations, what types of businesses are where there's nuanced questions and that you're having to kind of research that for them?
I mean, I've worked with just some healthcare providers so far. They've been the type of employers that are most concerned with making sure they follow this. I haven't spoken to anybody that's contracted with state agencies. I'm assuming, based on the way the proclamation is written, that the state agency would have to require those contractors and would reach out if they contracted like a business. They would have told that business, all of your employees that are working on this site and showing up to the site must be vaccinated for the mandate. If they haven't asked that, I would assume it's because the proclamation doesn't apply. And it may be, I've seen nothing in here that says if it's outdoor. It defines it like as an on-site volunteer or an on-site contractor and what that includes. And like it says, engaging at work physically at a building, facility, or job site or project site. So yeah, if the state agency hasn't asked, then the way I'm reading it, it's on them to make sure that those contractors are vaccinated, not on the specific business that the proclamation doesn't apply to.
Okay. Yes, Debbie.
I have a particular question in regards to my business. because I
Yeah,
provide,
before you ask a question particular to your business, sorry to cut you off. I do want to let you know that any questions asked today are not confidential and do not create an attorney-client relationship. So just know that if you ask something specific, know that it's not confidential because there's other people on this call.
oh, that's fine, and I don't care, because this is something I need answered for my clients. Because I provide services on site or from home or from my office, electronically. And I have asked for an exemption with one of the organizations that I work with, and they have granted it. But I do go on site once a week when there's nobody else in the office. We do have masking requirements and, cleanup procedures in place. Do I need to get documentation from all my clients that they have granted that exception for me to come in and work?
I would say, there's nothing in the proclamation and nothing that I've read that says that you as the contracted employee have to keep that documentation, just that the employer has to. But I would think for your own mindset that you'd want to keep that just to show that you are
yeah, because I'm
following
a
on your
vendor.
end.
Yeah, I'm basically a vendor for all of these clients.
Right. Yeah, you might want to keep it for your records just in case there's ever an issue in the future. But the way the proclamation is written is the employer who has contracted you, they are the ones who are required to keep the proof
Of the exemption. Okay.
of the exemption. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Linda Middleton, and I
Linda.
have 14 programs that are state funded.
Okay.
And I had to sign a declaration for each one of those saying that I either had everybody vaccinated, I saw the proof, I had it in their file, and anybody that I gave like a religious exemption to, I had to put that, or I had to declare that I had done that. So that's one thing. Even though I did all that, I have caregivers, and the caregivers are exempt from this, any in-home caregivers, but developmental disabilities is not. And we have developmental disabilities, or people with developmental disabilities that we serve. So that made me get everybody. It's just too hard to keep track of. So I put that out there for everybody. They either had to have a religious exemption or they had to have the vaccination. And the third thing that happened was just yesterday, I found out from the union, because the caregivers are union, that now I have to have an MOU, and only one person got fired, or whatever you want to call it, she wouldn't do either one. So I was lucky, but of course she reported that to the union, and I didn't know that. So just so you know, if you're in a union and you're doing something like that, you have to have an MOU with them to allow to be able to fire them, even though it's from the governor. We also have over 100 employees. So then you've got the federal mandate too. So I don't know, it's a mess.
Thank you for sharing that, Linda. Yeah, I like to stress to everybody that just because you're following the proclamation as it is now, that does not mean that there might not be potential suits coming your way, especially as the laws change and, either state or federal lawsuits are brought in by people changing laws. Unfortunately, you're not fully protected. All you can do to protect yourself is keep as much documentation as possible, follow the laws as they are now, seek legal advice when you think you need it, and stay up to date as much as possible. Like I did share my presentation with Colleen, so she's more than welcome to share that so that you guys have all those resources to be able to look at that information yourselves when you want. And yeah, stay up to date as business owners on those changing things just to help protect yourself from future lawsuits.
Can I say one more thing? This is Linda Middleton again. I also have contractors, subcontractors. They had to have it too. And one of the things we do is go into people's homes. So I'm surprised what you said about the HIPAA law, because clients and coworkers should be able to know if they're working next to someone who is not vaccinated. So I don't know about that.
I mean, people get a little confused sometimes with HIPAA. Like an employee can ask another employee. You can ask somebody you work with about their medical information, because HIPAA doesn't apply to individuals. It applies, to the businesses to maintain that. So if you're concerned and want to ask, you can ask. It's not everybody's going to share. It might create problems. But unfortunately, until federal law changes, there's nothing you can do with sharing that as a whole to all your employees.
I noted on the governor's proclamation that it specifically said this doesn't apply to local governments outside of education, school districts, but he strongly suggested that local government officials adopt similar policies as his and the proclamation. Do we know, are there any local governments that have done that in Clallam County?
Not that I've seen, but I haven't looked specifically for Clallam County to see, but nothing in what I've read or seen lately said anything. I probably, now that I'm up here, need to pay a little bit more attention to Port Angeles news and the local stuff.
I saw Randy Johnson is on with us, not to put him on the spot, but Randy, has the county made any, set any proclamations or resolutions or decisions about county staff, or do you know of any others outside of within Clallam County that have made any decisions around this, fire districts or anything like that?
I do not, Colleen. I don't, well, you can answer for the board. I don't think the board has, but we have not. We went the other direction to incentivize employees with giving compensating time off, et cetera, to try to, of course, get as many people vaccinated as possible. So that's the sort of direction we went, the incentive sort, or on the incentive side of things. But no, we have not. So if you want to know,
Okay.
I think, I can't recall what the county vaccination rate is, but it keeps getting better and better anyway, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. And I see Audrey added that the city of Forks has not either. So, all right. Well, does anybody else have any questions? I know this is a pretty tight topic, but I think it was important for business owners that may have questions to be able to ask or be able to watch this video online, which we will have posted later today, along with Donica's slides. We'll have those up on the chooseclallamfirst.com website under the Coffee with Colleen link.
Colleen,
Yes.
This is Graham, and I just wanted, I know we can take another question, Debbie, but while everyone is here too, I know we've done an employee retention credit before presentation with Lena. Hi, Lena. But I just want to make sure that everyone is aware, if this hasn't been covered, that the Q4 ERC credit is up in question right now. So that's not guaranteed that you're going to be able to take advantage of the Q4 employee retention credit. Where we continue to monitor that, but just no business should be planning 100% that they can take advantage of that credit. I just wanted to throw that in while we were here.
Great, thanks, Graham. I got a question about that. So if you can just really high level, it is an employer can get up to $28,000 back in taxes that they paid on their 941s, their quarterlies, federal taxes, and they can, if they had 20% less income quarter over quarter, and they could go back right now for every quarter in 2020, is that right? Or was there a deadline that came and went?
It's the comparison from 2021, the quarterly comparison against 2019, when you're looking at the 20% reduction, and you get a 70% tax credit on up to the first 10,000 paid per employee. So the way that works is if you are eligible for all 4 quarters, if Q4 is even a eligible quarter this year, we don't know, then you could get a maximum of $28,000 per employee. But if that employee is only paid $5,000 in a quarter, you're only going to receive up to a $3,500 tax credit. That's the high level overview. If you're a new business that started after February 2020, there's a employee retention credit startup recovery carve out that is only applicable to Q3 and Q4. And the House in DC is not, Congress is not looking to remove the Q4 eligibility for new businesses that started after February 2020. So those businesses in that very small carve out are still going to be eligible without any kind of reduction analysis either. The only eligibility requirement is that they've made or had less than $1 million in gross revenue, and then they're capped at $50,000 of credits per quarter. Credit being fully refundable back to the business owner, not a deduction.
Okay.
You want to, yeah.
So if someone just heard about this program right now and their revenues were significantly lower, they met the revenue reduction requirement from 2019, could they go back and get credits from 2020 at this point?
Lena, I saw you turned on your mic. You want to take this and jump in what you want to share?
Yeah, I had a question for you, Graham, too. So my understanding, Colleen, on that question is, yes, you can go back to the credit for 2020, but it's not by quarter, it's for the whole year. And you have to have a 50% reduction in revenue. So it's more difficult to meet that criteria for 2020, whereas 2021 is the 20% reduction as opposed to the 50% reduction, looking at it by quarter. But my question for Graham is, have you heard any additional information or additional guidance on the question of once you are ineligible because you didn't have that 20% reduction for a quarter, then you're either no longer eligible for the remainder of the year, or is your position still that you look at it each quarter individually?
I'm still looking at it that it's each quarter individually. 2020 is what I looked at, that it would make you ineligible for the year, but 2021, I've looked at it that each quarter individually. And also to tack on 2020, you max out at a credit of only $5,000 for the year in 2020, compared to if we do get all 4 quarters, or 3 quarters is 21,000 compared to the 5,000 of 2020. And for 4 quarters, it's 28,000. And the reason why the reason why I'm leaning also towards each quarter individually is I'd rather have clients try and take advantage of the credit. And if they are in that very specific situation where the IRS later comes out and gives different guidance, I ask that the clients hold on to the money and don't necessarily spend it, because it is a gray area. And then they can always return it, but I'd rather have them start the process while we have that gray area and capture the funds, and then they can always return it. I mean, we know that these are all new laws. We don't have IRS opinion letters. We don't have case precedent. So, there's no certainty here. And when there's no certainty, that's where I just err on the side of caution of capture the money, hold on to it. If something comes out, then we return it.
Yeah, and it's very lucrative credit. So if as a business owner, if you're eligible because your reduction, you've had a reduction of revenue of greater than 20% when comparing to 2019, then it's really advantageous to look at and see if you're eligible. And, I've worked with businesses that have received tens of thousands of dollars each quarter for the credit.
Mhm.
It was really
Yeah.
exciting when we got the first check back, because you never really know.
And the ERC, talking about when people are getting the check back, Lena, I don't know if you have any updated guidelines, but what I'm seeing is usually 4 to 8 months is how long it might take for the ERC credits to come back. It's a much lengthier period than the PPP funds, which, many more of us have applied for those and seen that.
Yeah, and I think it's faster if you on the 941. So the challenging piece about this credit is that you don't know if you're eligible until the quarter's completed. So if the 941 that you're completing at the end of the quarter includes the credit calculation, then I'm getting it back a little bit faster than that, probably less than 4 months. But if you're doing an amended 941, it's going to take much longer because it just takes that, it'll take that much more time to process it. I feel like, but
yeah,
it's a crapshoot. Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I can ask my question, Graham.
Yeah. Sorry, Debbie.
I saw several insurance agents that were on the call. With our business liability insurance, I received a modification for one of my clients that excluded the COVID-19. Well, there was an exclusion in there for COVID-19. Is that something we're going to see coming from our insurance companies, that we're not going to have coverage if we have a claim related to COVID-19?
That's a good question. If there's insurance agents on the call that want to jump in and help answer that, I think that it's important, Debbie, that any business is reading and understanding some of these exclusions. And even going back to, when COVID first started, we saw, did some of these just regular contracts, if you were contracted to build, a home or commercial building, there's a legal term called force majeure, or sometimes, acts of God is the legal philosophy that we talk about, that acts completely out of your control. Are they covered? And whether or not is COVID covered on a lot of these contracts that are so unforeseeable that it would cancel the contract. And now that we're aware of COVID, we should be looking at whether it's insurance contracts that you're signing or any other arrangement that you're signing with someone else. You should be empowered to understand those contracts that you're signing and look at some of those specific clauses. I don't know, once again, I don't know as an insurance, from an insurance industry as a whole. If someone else from the insurance industry wants to jump in and answer, that would be great on what the thinking is with the industry there.
I'm not hearing anybody jump in.
Nobody
Yeah.
wants to get into that deep water.
Debbie, I'll go there. We'll go there with you though. We can send a follow-up email to you and see what we find out. Maybe someone wants to talk offline when it's not recorded, and we can try and get you an answer.
Sounds great. Thanks, Graham.
All right.
Okay, well, does anybody else have a question for Donica or Graham? Either about ERC, employee retention credits, or the vaccine mandates? Okay, if not, I'd like to be very respectful of everyone's time, and I really appreciate you joining us, Graham and Donica. This is important information, and I know there's a lot of people that weren't able to join us at this time and probably will be downloading this recording to get the important information from you. And thanks so much also for sending the slides so that
Oh, you're
people
welcome.
can go directly that way as well. So I think we will call it a morning. Oh, actually, I see last minute from Sarah here. I've been told that employers are required to track who is and who isn't vaccinated. Is that really a requirement?
Like I said, you want to keep proof of of any request for an exemption. You want to keep proof of all the documentation that you have for vaccine. There's no specific requirement in there of how you keep that. But yes, you do want to have a list of or some sort of documentation, an organization, whether it's a list, whether it's a spreadsheet, however you want to keep it organized, that says who is vaccinated and who isn't. Because according to the proclamation, at any time, the state can require you as the employer to show that you have that documentation.
But that's only for businesses that fall under the governor's mandate.
Correct. Other than that, there's no guidelines as far as whether you need to keep track of that, because the way I understand HIPAA is you shouldn't be even asking unless you have to. So.
Okay. Well, great. All right. Did that answer your question, Sarah? What types of businesses fall under that requirement? So that was covered early on, and it will be on this recording, and it will be on the slides that we'll have posted on choosecolumnfirst.com, and then under the Coffee with Colleen link. Piggy will get that up there as soon as we can get it all downloaded and processed. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I think thank you, Graham. We'll call it a morning, and I'll
Thanks
stay
for
on
having
for a few
me.
minutes if anyone has questions. Thank you.